Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
It's The In Show, Australia's only show dedicated to innovation from Adelaide, Australia and across the globe.
Hello again, it's David Grice and Troy Sincock. We talk innovation on The In Show and we talk about all sorts of different ideas from all around the world. But this week we've had a bit of a theme going on, and for most of us, we get a bit obsessed with space. It's almost like this untouchable thing. We know people have been there, but only a select few, and it's a thing that as humans we don't get to experience ourselves.
No, it all seemed too unreal for me when I was a kid. I just never got into it. Couldn't even remember, the order of the planets or anything like that. And for me, it was just something that felt so foreign. But to be in the presence of these people is fantastic.
It is, and to think that we landed on the moon back in the 60s, and you think of the technology that was available then, and what they're coming up with now. I mean, it's amazing we even made it there in the first place.
It really is, and just even to have somebody that thought of, trying to get in a rocket and go, or just and then thinking about how to do that is just incredible.
Yeah.
Well, here's Matt Tetlo from Inovor Technologies, and they design and integrate small satellites, and they provide turnkey development services. And we started by asking him about the satellites they're building.
Okay, so the satellite, we're building just cube satellites, and we have a completely different architecture to sort of run-of-the-middle, the standard ones that you buy off the shelf at the moment. So we used a lot of standard components, off-the-shelf components, when we launched our QB50 satellite, and that didn't go so well for us, and likely, obviously you don't know for sure, but it's likely that it was one of the off-the-shelf systems that we bought that let us down.
Right.
And as a result, we decided that it was kind of cut the wrong way from our perspective, and we thought we could do this better. So we basically come up with a completely different design, and we are making the power system, the structure, and the pointing system. So our pointing system or attitude control is sort of my area of expertise, as is for a number of the team members. So we basically build the small attitude control system, and in fact we design them here, and they're actually manufactured here in Adelaide. Precision machining is done in Holden Hill by a company called Toolcraft, and Finetech make our PCBs, and we design all the electronics. That's all basically made here in Adelaide.
Yeah. So what do the satellites do once they obviously get popped up into orbit?
Okay, so at the moment we're working, our main focus is imaging spacecraft, and specifically we're looking at space situational awareness, which is from low Earth orbit looking out and detecting space objects. So we have a linkage grant with the University of Adelaide using novel image processing techniques to extract unidentified objects from an image. So you take an image out, of course it's full of stars, you get rid of all the stars, and then there's a whole lot of noise and all that kind of thing, because these are very, very faint objects, and then based on various principles, you can extract a whole lot of these objects that are not stars and are not noise, and you basically then have an object, and then you can track it, and then you pass that information down to the ground. So, at this time I was here and I was pointing this way and I saw this thing.
Yep.
And the next second it was there, the next second it was there. And from that kind of information, they can then extract what the orbit of this object is, puts it in a catalogue, and then they basically then work out when they're going to see it again, and then try and see it again, and then confirm that the object is there and what the object might be. And then also looking at characteristics of the object. Does it flash, for example? Is it sometimes brighter than other times, which suggests it might have a long edge and a short edge or something like that. So sort of try to characterize that a little bit. And this is all in the vein of space traffic management, essentially working out where objects are, making sure first of all that objects are not going to crash into each other, but also in the event that someone's maliciously sending a satellite near a high value asset and wants to shout in its ear or render it inoperable. Defence in particular is interested in knowing what's going on there. So we also work very closely with Defence. As I said, we were Defence contractors originally or primarily. So we kind of work in that space as well.
And presumably as well, given where the world is going in terms of, space travel for normal humans that aren't astronauts, I would assume then that this kind of technology will be really valuable for navigating into space with those spacecraft.
I mean, there are a number of things that small satellites are particularly good at, and they're particularly useful in a constellation form, as in a swarm of these satellites that can provide, greater coverage or, more survivable type of capability. So around Earth, they got a lot of value. But the same is for the Moon or for Mars, for example. So if you wanted to have some sort of observation system of Mars, you'd send a constellation, and small satellites is an ideal low-cost version of that. So you might you might send them all together on a rocket and then deploy all of them around, and then you could basically have high revisit rates of areas of Mars, for example. And of course that's very valuable because on Earth at least there are people in all over the place that can take photos locally for you, but of course in Mars there are not.
No.
So if you want to know all sorts of information about change and those sorts of things, then a constellation of satellites is ideal, and then a constellation of small satellites is cheaper. Nothing's cheap, but cheaper, and making it kind of more affordable. So that's way down the track. I mean, we're very much focused on our Earth applications at the moment, and it's much cheaper to get into low Earth orbit than it is to get to low Mars orbit.
Yes.
So we're very much focused on Earth, but small satellites have an application here, and they also have an interplanetary application.
And how big are these things?
So they're typically in units of 1 unit is a 10 by 10 by 10 centimeter cube, so just very, very small.
Wow.
And sort of 2 units is the one that we made before, and now we're making a 3 unit, which is sort of roughly the size of a loaf of bread. And then you can make, they get up to sort of 12 and 16 unit, which is sort of briefcase size or the size of a slab of beer kind of thing. So that's the sort of scale we're looking at, sort of 25, below 25 kilos.
Yeah, right. And so when you talk about the multiple unit boxes, are they all doing the same thing, or are they able to do different things within that?
When you talk about the units, that's just in terms of how they fit into the launcher.
Right.
But it's actually one continuous space inside, and it's all packed in highly dependent on what your application is as to what is packed inside that space.
Right.
So it's just if you only need 1 unit, then you pack your whole satellite in there, and it's got to have everything it needs. I mean, you've got to be able to talk to ground, you've got to have onboard compute, you've got to have a power system, you've got to have all that kind of thing managed, even if it's a 1 unit or if it's the Hubble Space Telescope. It's the same sort of scale. You have to have all these subsystems. So the satellites that we have all the subsystems of the larger ones. They just are much smaller and cheaper.
So getting them into orbit must be a little bit of a challenge, and obviously a very costly exercise. And are you doing that out of Australia, or do you have to go elsewhere to get them up?
Well, at this stage, there are no launches out of Australia, orbital launches, so we go international, and it's typically ride share, so it's very difficult to go to a particular orbit because you kind of, always, secondary or a tertiary payload, so there's always a primary that's going somewhere and you're just kind of hitching a ride. CubeSats are often not put in an ideal orbit for their application. They're just stuck in an orbit, and this is a cost issue. And of course, Australia not having the capability at the moment to do that is, less than ideal. I mean, from the industry's point of view, but also from a strategic point of view. So if defence need a particular imager or communication system or something like that, they're not able to deploy it themselves. If America's busy dealing with some other problem which could arise, then we don't have the ability to do that. And in fact, Australia is very, very well geographically located for launch, because the most common orbit or very, very useful orbit is a polar orbit, sort of sun-synchronous orbits, which are kind of north to south, essentially. And we have this massive coastline down south launching south. So there's a lot of interest at the moment in the state in particular in launch, and there are companies like Southern Launch who are basically out there trying to get launch facilities going, and there are a number of launch vehicles that are interested in launching here. So kind of, and then there are also groups like Gilmore Space that are actually building the rockets themselves, hybrid rockets, interested in bringing them here. So when I say bringing them here from interstate and launched out of South Australia, so there's a lot of momentum in both the facilities and the rockets, and I think it's just a matter of time before we have rockets launching either from South Australia, or there's also another one called Equatorial Launch up in kind of going in Northern Territory.
And obviously it's a really exciting time here in South Australia as well at the moment, with all of the government support that's coming around the space industry, and with the space conference just recently that we had here and those sorts of things. Are you seeing anything specific sort of emerging through all of that is really exciting you at the moment? Yeah,
absolutely. I think the momentum is higher more than I've ever seen before. I mean, I've been in this game in the space area. I was sort of traditionally in a launch vehicle area, and I've been trying to get grants either when I was through the uni or as a private person, sort of private company, trying to get sort of the space activity, and it's kind of just been everyone's dragging their feet, everyone's not that interested. And in the last sort of, I would say, 2 years, it's really started to pick up. And there's a whole lot of startups have started in Australia, in South Australia in particular, in this area, but also in the eastern states. And there's just sort of a lot of momentum. Of course, now the announcement of the Space Agency, that is a significant step forward, I think, which will hopefully pull the space industry together and give us a bit of direction and a bit of a conduit or the ability to interact internationally and all that kind of thing. So, this is the best I've ever seen it. I mean, I've only been here for 20 years. But it's certainly the best I've ever seen. It's obviously not near as good as it was back in the Woomera days or when they were launching Resat and those sorts of things. There was, obviously a lot of hype then as well, or a lot of interest in it. And I think this is just a resurgence of it. And then I think we just got to, try and push this forward and make it carry on, basically.
It's really, really exciting. And do you have any sort of words of wisdom obviously you've gone on a reasonable journey in this industry. Have you got any words of wisdom for anybody out there that wants to enter into the world of space and that sort of thing? I've got an 8-year-old boy who just loves flight and all that sort of thing. So he just wants to get in a rocket and go to Mars, So, but So have you got any wisdom that you might be able to impart to somebody that's trying to get into it?
Well, I think an ecosystem is so important. You can't just get up and have the space industry and it's just me and I can do everything and I don't want anybody else to be there with you. You basically have to have this ecosystem. So I would strongly encourage everybody who's got an idea, got a passion for it, to give it a go. See where your widget fits in the world and, talk to the people. The industry is very open. It's a fairly tight-knit community. Everybody knows each other. And it's fantastic when you get into it. You kind of have reached across a number of different companies as well, and schools and universities. And we try and engage with schools as well. And obviously, I'm very close to the university. So yeah, I strongly encourage you, just give it a go. I mean, you got to have a lot of drive and persistence because you get knocked back all the time. Just be prepared to get knocked back, and just make sure you're ready for being knocked back, and don't stay sitting down when you do get knocked back. Just stand up again and try again, and eventually it sort of happens. So,
and the ecosystem in South Australia at the moment, how would you describe it? Is it a healthy one? Is it growing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're in such a great position. The state is so supportive of us. We have this fantastic, Defence SA, or now SASIC, which is the South Australian Space Industry Centre, I think.
Good job.
I should know that. And it's a team in the state government that are really, really supportive. And we kind of from the state, Department of State Development, Investment Attraction South Australia, SASIC or Defence SA, those people are sort of out there really pushing the space agenda. I mean, they see the value in the jobs. I mean, the aerospace industry is very good from a jobs point of view. It grows, historically has grown at 3 times GDP worldwide. So if you can get an industry, it's going to be valuable, right? And they understand that. But they just, going above and beyond basically to get the space industry going. So we have fantastic government support, and Tech NSA or state government gave us support as well, and they've funded other organisations. And there's venture capital coming into the picture now. Defence are also sort of turning around. Instead of always wanting to buy everything off the shelf from the US or Europe, they're now sort of considering whether it can be, how do we grow the innovative high-tech industry in Australia, and that also is just sort of also part of this momentum. So I think at an Adelaide level, at a state level, and at a federal level, there's a lot of support, and I think we're going to go places.
And you mentioned before about the manufacturing that you're getting done here in South Australia. Is that a deliberate decision you made as a company that you wanted to make sure it stayed here, or is it because our capabilities here are so much better than everywhere else?
I want it to be here. I think there's no reason why it shouldn't be here. We have all the skill base, we have all the technology. I mean, we have no problem finding the people that we want. Okay, they may not have made satellites before, but they come out of with a good foundation in maths and physics or something like that, out of an engineering degree or a science degree, and they basically have all the fundamental skills that you need. And to apply it to space it's not like this huge step. I mean, space is exciting, but it's not special. It's just obeys physics, just like driving a motor car or flying an aeroplane. It's all the same sort of things. So we have all the people that are educated here. We have the skills here. And then, the precision machining or the manufacturing is here as well. I mean, we make, very complex weapon systems. We make, submarines. We make ships. All the skill base is here. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be doing satellites here as well. So I guess I made a deliberate effort to make sure that only if I couldn't find what I wanted in South Australia, then I'd look elsewhere. But in saying that, there's no reason why you wouldn't. It can be done here, and it is being done here. And it's just it makes sense to have the ecosystem. Like I say, you don't want to just, you can't exist on your own. You have to have everything around you.
And the collaborative nature of South Australians in general seems to be something that's really powerful. I think that doesn't really happen in many other places.
Yeah, I think so. I think the majority of, as I said, the space ecosystem is quite small, and the majority of us are kind of all trying to work together, sort of find out our own niche and where we kind of fit in. And I think that sort of spirit is what makes an ecosystem grow. So I definitely agree. And we also have, you kind of have the technical arm as well, but you also need the policy arm to, to understand what it means when you launch a satellite, or what the risk is to the country if it crashes into, someone else's satellite, all those sorts of things. And we actually have a very strong legal team here, in fact, at Adelaide Uni, who are very, very well-known internationally. Expertise in in space law and the policy side of things. So we kind of have a very strong technical arm. We have a very collaborative community. We have fantastic skills around us to build whatever we need, and then we have a good understanding of the policy. And again, because it's a tight-knit community, we all know each other, and you can kind of just go and tap on the door and say, "Listen, I've got this problem," and people talk to you. So, we're in a good space at the moment. I just hope it continues.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Matt, thanks so much for sharing your story with us, and we look forward to monitoring your journey over the next few years as you continue to grow and develop your products and services. And thanks so much for joining us on the In Show.
No worries. Thank you very much for your interest, and be very happy to have a follow-on at some stage.
That was Matt Tetlo from Inovor Technologies on the In Show podcast. And if you know an innovator that we should have on the show, we really want to hear from you. Just drop us a line at theinshow.online, and you can check us out on Facebook and Twitter as well. Tomorrow, Dave, we're keeping the theme running and we're talking more space stuff.
Yeah, indeed. We're talking to Flavia Tata Nardini from Fleet Space, and she's an amazing woman, and her fascination for space began when she was a child.
We'll find out what's in for her tomorrow on the In Show podcast.
The In Show Interview. Subscribe to the In Show podcast on iTunes. A Dave and the Beanstalk production.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.